Go. Welcome to Truthstream. We are here today with Adam Gell, and I'm going to read a little bio about Adam. We met Adam once again through our Paisan friend, Michael Del Roca. He brings amazing people out into the world. And Adam is a former middle school phys ed teacher. Presently, he is an Akashic Records consultant, Reiki, and Shamanic practitioner. Also a documentary filmmaker and fellow YouTube content creator. From the Akashic Records, he learned that he was a Jewish doctor during World War II, and will attach links to his documentary film and YouTube channel in the links below. Adam, welcome to Truthstream. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, nice to be here with both of you. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here.
Absolutely. Yep. So, I mean, I'm sure this is so intriguing. I've been talking to Scott off and on throughout the last couple of years about, learning more about the Akashic Records, and now is our opportunity. So do you want to start with a little bit about your background, and then maybe we'll segue into
absolutely. Yeah, well, I can segue in terms of how I've gotten to the learning about the Akashic Records. Perfect. So I was a middle school teacher for 30 years in Brooklyn. Having worked as a phys ed teacher in the gym, there was a certain point where I would walk into the gym and I realized that I would look up at the vents in the gym itself, and I would get a sense of panic that would come over me. I couldn't really tie it or pin it to anything specific, but it became more of a psychosomatic along with then a physical type of condition based upon that thought or whatever I was feeling, like choking, so to speak. And from that particular point, I had my own particular stresses going through a divorce and whatever came along with that. But it was interesting. There was a woman at work who had told me to, call up one of her friends who did energy work. And at the time, the only type of holistic work that I really knew was maybe acupuncture and acupressure, which I was interested in. But beyond that, I didn't think anything existed past the body itself in terms of energy. So what happened was I visited this person. This was about 10 years ago. And when I went there, he was actually telling me about my life and telling me that I had the ability to do energy work and healing work as well. And at that point, I didn't really understand it because I didn't know what he was doing. But as it turned out, he would eventually tell me, and I'd feel the different energy shifts in my body. I'd have a deeper sense of intuition, and I would be able to see things during these sessions that may be premonitions or feelings. As it went along, it probably opened me up to a more intuitive state and raised my level of consciousness to make me more aware of going down that hole or rabbit hole of, opening myself up to all the information that existed that wasn't in the matrix, so to speak. And so from there, what happened was I delved into trying to understand or look into the Akashic Records. There was a book called One True Love by an author by the name of Gabrielle Law, who was my friend, who's my friend now. At the time, it was just I was getting a reading and reading the book, and when I realized that the Akashic Records was a connection to the universe's library, so to speak, I realized that there was probably a potential for me to find out information that was deeper than what I knew at that point. So what happened was I got a reading, and incidentally, the person who I just mentioned before, who was doing the energy work, had told me that I see you in Germany somewhere, not specifically, but a past life. I see you marching or walking with soldiers. And to me, I was thrown off a little bit because while I had some type of feeling and a connection in some way, I wasn't too sure. But when I had a reading with this woman, she told me, she said, "Do you speak German?" I said, "I do." I didn't give her any information. And she said, there's a connection to Germany for you. And what comes through is that you were in the concentration camps as a doctor. And interestingly enough, I dressed up kind of like with boots and suspenders in the middle of mid 80s when I went to college, and dressed up in like a 1940 type of garb, I would say, that what people wore. And I felt very comfortable with those type of shoes and those types of pants that matched that era in history. But I didn't tie anything together. Although what I did tie together was that I was married to a German woman. for 13 years. I lived in Germany. Many of her relatives were in the army, and they would communicate with me, and they would say, "Speak German, speak German, speak German." It was almost as if it was like evoking some type of past that was supposed to awaken in me. So, having gone to this reading and having this reading, she told me that I was a doctor, and that I was a doctor in the concentration camps. And she said you were treated, you were well respected, but then at the end they had to get rid of you. So, proceeding from this point, I wind up. I learn. I become a Reiki practitioner. I started doing energy work, and through those practices and learning the Akashic Records, I wind up having a client. And well, first off, I do a reading for myself, and the reading says that I have a German mother from a past life and a Jewish father from that life, and that I came from Berlin. Okay. So I'm having clients, and I am doing a reading for a woman and doing energy work for her. I actually am doing energy work. At the end of the session, she gets off the couch from the Zoom session and she says, "Oh my God." I said, "What is it?" She says, "I remember you." I said, "From where?" She said, from the concentration camps. She said, "I remember you there. It was a very dreary situation, and it was very sad and gruesome what was going on. And I all of a sudden felt it." So she also read the Akashic Records. So I said, "Can you do me a favor, and could you look into my Akashic Records when you get a chance? I'll ask you some questions based upon this, and then you can answer them." So I did. And she said, "You had a German mother and a Jewish father, and you were from Berlin." And that's what I received prior to this type of session. And she said, "You were in the camps," and it confirmed exactly what I told you, what I was speaking of. So I took this information and trying to digest that past experience into the present moment was kind of difficult at times. Wasn't easy for me to understand. There was a little guilt involved and shame involved, and that I was working through certain instances of those experiences. So then I had a client, an interview with two people for my YouTube channel. And after the interview was over, the two people who had spoken about past life regression had spoken to me and said, "Adam, I think if you contact my friend, there'll be some type of connection. Contact this woman," or the woman might have contacted me, and she said, "I think I remember you from Auschwitz. You pulled me off the line, and I know your number, and I know your name." And she looked up the name, and there was that name in the books of the concentration camps, that specific name. I don't remember what it was. And to me, I was appalled because I've always had a distaste for striped clothing. I couldn't wear bathrobes, anything that had stripes on it, although I'm wearing something a little bit close to it. But no, I had a distaste of any type of bathrobe or pajamas that were striped. I couldn't wear them. I had panicky since I'm young. And now I was tying all of this together, the language that I was speaking, the connection to the German ex-wife, living in Germany, speaking German fluently within 5 months, going to university in Frankfurt. And then I also do remote viewing, and I decided, you know what, let me remote view or look back into the past. And I drew a picture of a building. And the building I drew was one of the buildings called the Charité, which is in Berlin, which is the hospital that many of the Jewish and German doctors studied at before they went to war or prior to the war. And it was in line with exactly what I saw. So it was all of these experiences now trying to digest and to try to assimilate into the life that I'm living now, which brought me to the Akashic Records, to actually realize that since I was able to get this information for myself, then it would be also helpful for other people to have insight into some of the experiences that they're experiencing in this present life that are karmic from things that need to be resolved. And there were things that I needed to resolve or to work on, which I presently have, or in the process of doing, or will do through my life.
Right.
Yeah, don't we all? That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's cool that you didn't you didn't really start on this maybe in your 20s. You went through life and then you discovered this, and we can all learn things and later on. So what yeah, guide us through how you've now put this into your life and how you're using it and helping people.
Well, first off, the Akashic Records itself is a great tool for a person to connect to their soul's path, their soul's journey. The Akashic Records is a library of information, not a literal library, but an information of all of our actions, deeds, thoughts, and what we speak that get recorded in an energetic field called the Akasha. And that Akasha is like, it's known in science through Irvin Laszlo, who was a Nobel Peace Prize winner, not winner, but a candidate, and Albert Einstein as that spooky energy, that web that interconnects everything in the universe, the space between space. And so when we think, or when we act, or when we do something, our actions are being recorded, like when we throw a rock into a lake or a pond and it reverberates through the lake and it sends those waves outward, and they wouldn't stop if there was nothing to stop it, if there were no boundaries of the lake. But there is a boundary called the Akasha, which then holds on to that information. And a person like myself, what I do is, or a person who reads the Akashic Records, is reading that information in the form of a holographic image, in the form of hearing information or seeing information. And based upon questions that a client would ask, I therefore receive information that resonates with the question that the person is looking for. So it connects the person to their true purpose, to their soul's purpose, whether it be a career, whether it be a relationship, whether it be what they need to work on. And so it's assisted me in helping my soul grow to a place of better understanding my true essence of who I am, as opposed to who I want to be in an ego sense or in a material world sense.
That's huge.
Yeah, it becomes lonely in like when we go up a path of breaking free from a system or from things that we're indoctrinated in. It becomes lonely because we know who our real connection is, and it's really connected to the spiritual realms or the spiritual energy. We're not talking religious. I'm talking about having a connection to our ancestors who've passed on, to masters who guide us, and other types of spirits that are around us. Even all different types of extraterrestrial entities or beings as well.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is going through this great awakening, if you will. I find myself not really wanting to be around people that that don't get it, that whether it's friends or family members. It's very challenging because people say, hey, what's going on, what's the latest? And I just want to say, you know what, can you just watch our show? Because this is exhausting. I mean, I love this.
Yes.
But then to try and explain it to, whether it's my mom or other people or in-law, it's so much. And it's almost like people that are asking about some of this now. I'll use a sports reference. It's almost like, okay, it's the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl, and you're trying to explain what a football is and the game, and it's kind of very challenging and exhausting at times. And so sometimes I don't go out, I don't interact with a lot of people. Scott, I now I understand Scott more over the last few years because he's been more awake about it. So I mean, have you been guiding people in the last couple years as we've went through this scamdemic as to what's going on and been there for them? Because I mean, this is a pretty challenging time. Well,
I think that everybody starts off maybe at the same starting gate, in terms of, let's say, if a person's of the same age. Because you'd say if the person is of my age, they should have an understanding of what life is about, because if, let's say, we've individually done that. And so the expectation is that everybody's at the same level. But each soul evolves and has different, it reincarnates. And so therefore a soul can be older and have more experiences than a person who is of the same age. Sure. And what it means is that not everybody's in the same level. And each person is there then therefore to help others and assist them on their journey to help bring them home, so to speak, so that they can find their way. I think we lose patience because we get so frustrated, because the fact is we do feel lonely when we're not understood. And so we want people to be, in the company of our understanding, so that we have company and we can share our thoughts and have, dialogue and feel supported. But the real growth comes when we stand alone within our own self, and then we eventually become the examples or the lighthouse. Then other people can, receive that light from, because you can't feed a baby a full spoon of food when it can't swallow it. So you have to give it little tiny pieces. And I think that's how it works with human nature. A person's evolution is at their own pace and their soul pace. And anything else would go against their free will. It would be forcing, and it would become, witchcraft. You wind up forcing things. You're doing something that's going against the soul's journey. Now, I am, as in terms of doing the Akashic Records and having clients, as you asked, and working with people. Yeah, you see a lot of people who I feel isolated, and they feel isolated because they're actually growing from the system and evolving, and their level of consciousness is expanding. And at that point, you become shamed and you become ostracized from your family, from your friends that you once knew, who no longer accept or are afraid of doing that themselves. So I think once we realize that, once we show that we have the confidence to do it and to walk the path, then I think people say, oh, they're not going to fall off the track or get pushed off the, that little, walking beam, that little thin, narrow tightrope. Right. We can't push him or her off, because they're not, even if they fall, they're still going to get back up on. And I think it works in terms of conditioning of how we've been raised in homes where we've either accepted the dialogue or the things that went on in a family or a house, or we've challenged it. And sometimes when you challenge it, you become the black sheep of the family. And then it's easier to do it thereafter with other issues in life, but you do feel alone and you do feel abandoned. And so most of the people I'm working with feel abandoned and they feel alone, but then they find their truth. And then once they do that, they become an example, and other people who were once like they were will then learn from them. I think it's passing the torch of information, but being gentle and patient, which is hard to do in these times, but necessary.
Yeah. And through this show, it's been amazing meeting people like Michael Della Rocca and people like yourself. And I don't know if it was Michael, but someone said that we're the golden sheep, not the black sheep. And I was like, well, that's kind of a nice thing, because I've always been an independent thinker, but what's been interesting is to learn stuff that Scott was saying, and then now I hear it from so many other amazing people. It's like, oh, I mean, and I've said this before, not that I didn't believe Scott, but I'm like, I need to hear this from more than one person. I mean, I can't just, you can't be the only thing. And I'll tell my mom, like, hey, don't really listen to me. Listen to some of the guests on the show. There's a woman that she knows named Holly, and she'll see her posts. I'm like, it's better to listen to other people than just me, because I don't want to try and just cram this stuff down your throat, if you will. So.
Well, the geopolitical, the financial, all of these different topics, they do, to understand it, you really do need to do several thousands of hours, researching it. So it's hard to answer that question when people ask, because they don't have 1,000 hours for you to explain it. But in the spiritual realm, it really is more about it's experiential. There's things that until you've experienced it, you don't understand the reference. It's you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's I would say that the journey of isolation and the journey of being confronted with people who disagree or shame, or not in a negative or victimizing way, but in a way of making us feel, or a person feeling alone in their thinking and not being understood, reverts back to self-love. So the main energy from what we're supposed to get from that is by having difficult people in our lives who challenge our belief system, can teach us to love ourselves. They teach us to say, I'm worthy, I am lovable, I can generate self-love. Otherwise, we run along with the crowd, and then we don't really get love from internally. We get it from, people's accolades of us, or how they, pick us up, and, falsely. It's not a genuine self-confidence. It's not a genuine self-worth. And we generate that self-worth by being alone, by being tested by difficult people. The most difficult people are the closest people to us at times, family members, relationships. And that teaches us self-love. And I think these current circumstances are teaching people to become free thinkers inevitably, to be able to be challenged by people who are trying to dictate policies, force people into situations that they do not want to be in. But people, because of how they've been conditioned, go along with the conditioning, and just say, you know what, it's easier just to do this rather than question and to, rely upon my own self for answers, or to research stuff that I'm afraid to stand alone with. And
well, I have a question on the soul contract, because we hear about the soul contract, and Michael Del Roca always says, show me my signature where I signed up for this. But
that's a good one.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about what that is? And I guess I think of, friends of mine that I worry about since they got the, and I know there's a lot of placebos, and I know that unfortunately there are some people that, are going to be physically affected by that. So is that something that we, or that as humans, we've signed up for in advance, and we kind of, maybe we know in some way how we're going to perish, or what this life is?
Really based upon many of the people I interview, and based upon the information that I've gathered from that, specifically some of the people like Raymond Moody, who talks about life after life, near-death experiences, Eben Alexander, and my own research and understanding of life itself, Robert Schwartz. We are souls that have a life review, where our life is reviewed. We see what we did right, what we did wrong, not only in our eyes, but in the eyes of those around us who we hurt or we imparted our actions upon. We develop contracts with people that we need to then resolve these issues when we reincarnate again. But it doesn't necessarily mean we come back in the same role or in the same relationship that we left this earth on. So in other words, if a brother and a sister left, passed on, they don't come back necessarily as brother and sister, but they have a contract to each other, to maybe as a husband and a wife, to resolve certain things that they didn't resolve in the life that they led and during that life. So there are contracts that are constantly that we sign up for, because the earth is a plane of learning. It's a school of graduation where we have to learn in the life. And if not, we come back again to relearn that particular lesson. And so we have contracts between people that need to be resolved in order so that we do things right. That our karmic cycle from past lives not evens the score, but we resolve things on a soul level. That we learn and we grow and we develop love, compassion. So in one lifetime, your lesson will be love. The next lifetime, your lesson will be compassion. Next lifetime, you'll how to overcome, being suppressed or oppressed. You'll be the king, the queen, the white man, the black man, the wealthy person, the poor person, the sufferer, the oppressor, and the suppressor, like I said before. So we have contracts in order to evolve our soul so that it has these human experiences, and through the interactions with people on the earthly plane, we develop contracts or cords that need to be resolved and dismissed or cut and removed. And when we raise our level of consciousness in a lifetime, we recognize the fact of who is holding on to us and who we're holding on to in a codependent manner that keeps our soul from evolving, but keeps us connected in the human experience.
Wow.
With this in mind, and I contemplate this fairly regularly, we have the whole racism conversation going on, and we're getting beaten over the head with it left and right. It's a political tool at this point, but it's shocking to me that people even think in terms of race, given that, you've probably experienced life as every race, creed, and gender. All these
absolutely.
To me, it's kind of a foreign concept to evaluate someone based on their genetic code, their appearance.
Well, I believe that the media, the the human experience of creating conflicts between people is a great way of divide and conquer.
It is.
You know how the news can put on certain conflicts and harp on that and sensationalize it in order to create division. Through division, you can have a hostility against a group of people who did no harm to you, but then abroad in the media and the news, and it plays out as if they're a problem. And if you think about it, it's a tool of divide and conquer. It's a way of creating tension. It's a way of parents, for example, creating conflict between siblings when they're in a narcissistic role where they're looking to exert their own hurt and pain on children without being mature adults. And there's no difference of how the government and how the media operates out of playing one against the other to make one the favorite and one the one who's not favored, and then making that unfavored person hate the favored person. And that's what they do in the media. The media is sensationalizing things to create conflict. And as you said before, I believe that if that didn't exist, there would be no conceptualizing or understanding of what's really happening, or why you should hate somebody, or why you should have hostility towards somebody. Because on a one-on-one individual basis, people are human beings to each other.
We're all individuals.
It's only through television and through the news and through, you know, drama and through movies of how things are played. And obviously now there's a shift in what they're trying to do to give people a sense of false power. And that sense of false power is creating hostility, which is wrong. But that's what, in some ways, I feel they want.
Oh, of course. Well, I mean, it's like sleight of hand. If
Yeah,
we're bickering with each other, we don't notice what's going on over here with what they're doing. But I think the larger point I was trying to make was just, you know, when you embrace this concept, or when you
right.
get a sense of your soul and the timelessness of it, it seems to negate that line of thinking altogether. You know, so might be a possible path to the world getting a whole lot nicer.
Well, I think if we take it, you know, have like a checklist of sitting with ourselves and saying, okay, today, let me recognize that, like just what you said, that I am a soul in a body, and I am having a human experience, but my soul inevitably needs to be nourished. And how do I nourish my soul? Through raising my level of consciousness and not falling into the trap of the games and the traps that we fall under when we watch news, or we hear the news, or we get caught up in the conflicts that exist. And it becomes lonely not focusing in on those things, and it becomes fearful because we want to have some grasp of reality by seeing what's going on. But in essence, we're really being guided in a spiritual way to really let ourselves be navigated by that. Like you're saying, you know, playing the role of this person could be, you know, one lifetime you're a female, next lifetime you're a male, and all the different gamuts of what we experience. We have to feel it in order to be relatable and understanding the human experience and other people.
God, it seems like self-knowledge is such an important part of this. And one thing I've observed is trying to make sense of how crazy things are in the last, I don't know, almost decade, is you know, we're constantly looking at a screen, we're constantly distracted, our attention spans are about 30 seconds now, thanks to social media and whatnot, and there's very little time for reflection in anyone's life. You have to really make that space consciously, or it isn't there. And I think prior to this technological time, there was just always time in your day for some self-reflection. But what I've noticed is everything's about identity, you know, identity politics and whatnot, and people are looking externally for their identity, and it's quite obvious now, which has got to be a huge letdown for the soul, I would think. I mean,
Well,
that's really,
yeah.
that's kind of going backwards, but it seems to be a function of the way we live now.
Well,
People don't take the time.
I think we've been confronted with these times. So, you know, in order for us to take, you know, stock in or, you know, take stock in who we are and where we're going.
Right.
You know, you mentioned a little bit, you mentioned a second ago that, you know, before this last 2 or 3 years that we were able to daydream, or, you know, whatever. But in essence, we really only daydreamed, or we only thought a little bit. We didn't push ourselves to grow to the level that we have to do that now. and it's painful to grow. So I think the only way we're going to change is through these difficult times. Like a diamond becomes a diamond, right? Because first it has to be sandstone, then it turns into coal, and then coal turns into a diamond under great pressure. And only under great pressure can we evolve and change. We need to be sandpapered, like in order to really find out who we are and smoothing ourselves out. So.
Yeah, it feels like we've lived almost a few lifetimes in the last couple of years. I mean, as this, some of us have thought that this awareness or the Great Awakening was going to be as far as a linear fashion, a shorter time period. Like, people are going to find out about the truth about certain things in a year or two. And now here we are in 2023. But I guess the good part is, like, we started our show in the summer of 2022, and the longer this goes on, the more you find out in some ways what you're made of and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And so I try to look at the positive in a lot of this, and as stressful and challenging as it's been, I mean, the growth has been beyond what I could have imagined. But I'm also wondering, and it feels like we could talk to you about anything. So thank you for being an open book. Have you heard of the term NPC, or non-playable characters, at all?
As it refers to AI, or?
Well, just like we've done some, different interviews, and we've looked into certain things, and you want to take it from here?
Well, yeah, there's an interesting conversation going on, and the confirmations, whether it's a tarot reader or a clairvoyant or somebody with dowsing rods, our friend tested it out with dowsing rods. A lot of various diagnostics, but the concept that there are an awful lot of soulless people, occupying the planet, 75% basically, or 70%, I think.
Yeah,
70%.
But it's alarming. I mean, it's astounding that it would be
right. And the non-playable character, that refers to like video gaming. There's characters that are in the game, but you don't really interact with them. They're not programmed to be able to interact with you in the game the way other characters might. So that's where that term came in. Okay. But the whole idea that there might be, this kind of dips its toes in the simulation theory a bit. Maybe that these are just, well, I don't want to reduce it to images, but maybe these aren't actual people, but they're here to facilitate the experience that our souls need. I don't know.
Well, it's very possible, right? Whoever we interact with, we're going to have some type of lesson when we interact with them, no matter what it is, whether it's a dog, whether it's a tree, a stone. It's what we get out of it, and it's what we focus in on is what will manifest. A lot, regardless of how we look at life, no matter what extreme we're on an extreme. What I like to do is, and as I mentioned before, and I focus more on balance, the masculine and feminine balance, so to speak, which is the energies of the heavens and the ground. So in shamanism, what we have is you have the Mother Earth, which are the roots, and you have the sun, which is the father of the shamanic tradition. So a tree cannot grow without its roots in the ground and its leaves being bathed in the sun. So when we go to one extreme without the other, then we lose or we die, so to speak, right? Because a tree, if it's not rooted, will not get its nutrients, and if it's not getting sun in it, it's going to eventually die. So we as human beings, if we focus in only on in a dual system, right, left or right, right or left, and we take the approach that I'm right and you're wrong, or vice versa, we're in the same energy and we're stuck. And when we push ourselves somewhat in the middle and when we look at it from a perspective of a more neutral position, then I think we're able to then focus in on our own growth and have more power for our future and manifest something. Because I think regardless of what we believe in, and we have an understanding of what we believe in, I think that focusing too much on different things takes us away from the power that we have to actually manifest, but then sometimes have the fear that if we try and we don't create what we want, then we feel like it was a waste of time. And so if we preoccupy ourselves with information or things that will be agreeable to our ego and to our soul in some degree, then I think then we sell ourselves short of this journey that we're supposed to be on. Because regardless of what anybody believes or doesn't believe, we all had fear. I mean, I had fear, but my way of handling fear was not going along with the crowd. And when I did an Akashic Record reading, when I asked what was going on, I heard bioweapon, and I heard get off the line, which means don't follow the crowd. And I've been guided with that energy of that. So that's the information that I used. That was a soul information. And so from that, I was confident enough to just believe that kind of stuff, which was what I needed to navigate through these times. And if a person doesn't have that connection, you have to go somewhere outside of yourself to get information. And it tests our ego, which makes us say, yes, I believe in that, and hold firm to that. So while I believe in things, I realize that if I stick too tightly to one side, it's because I'm in a state of fear. I'm in my ego mind. It's because I have to be right. I have to get the information, what I believe to be right. And once we're in that state, we're no different than the person who believes in that which we don't believe in ourselves.
Well said.
So the vision that we feel, we create the vision ourselves because we're holding on to one side. We're like a tree that's not bending when the wind comes. And it makes us angrier and lonelier and more fearful.
Yeah.
And that's what creates the snapping effect and the feeling of like, holding on even tighter. Right. So it's a matter of letting go and giving ourselves, surrendering ourselves to the energies of the spiritual realms, which means sitting with ourselves, meditating, breathing, exercising, daydreaming, hearing the inner voice, what the inner voice has to say to us. And the inner voice, if we sit quietly, will guide us with imagery and with subtle, moments of insight into where we're supposed to be headed and what we're supposed to actually believe. So to answer that question, I think I answered it in some way.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've noticed also is that intuitive abilities seem to really be coming online. I mean, I've had a lot of interesting experiences throughout my life with this, but I'm finding now that those can be challenging conversations to have because there's no frame of reference for most people. But I'm interacting with more and more people that are experiencing, that type of, what do I want to say, whether it's a clairvoyance or sentience or any of the clairs, any kind of just an intuitive notion or whatnot.
Telepathy, maybe.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
That's really been on the rise, at least that I've noticed. Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, well, I would say that the people who I'm in contact with are on that path. So then I would say that, yes, I would notice that. The people who don't contact me for any readings or haven't traveled this path would not resonate with me, and therefore I wouldn't know about that. But
maybe that's
I think that's more of it. I think that we attract types of people we're supposed to be working with based upon where we're at in our own personal journey, whether what we've overcome, what we've learned, and what we're learning will attract people who are on the same path. We may know a little bit more about what they know, but eventually they'll be learning too, and then they'll teach somebody. It's like, raising everybody up, taking everybody home, as they say. We're all walking each other home. I actually felt that for the first time this week. I understood the concept. When you're really trying to help somebody like who's trying to learn and like genuinely understand things, breaking free from the matrix of family that shames or society that shames or, people that just don't get certain things that a person gets. And when that person steps away and says, you know what, I'm going to jump off the diving board into the water rather than just stand there. And you see them jump in. They didn't do it right, but they jumped into the water and they said, okay, I took the first step. So then you know that you can assist the person, or at least offer them some further insight into what you've learned if you've walked that path. So I think more people are walking the path because they're being forced to walk the path, or they're forced to hold onto the handrail even tighter.
Right. Well, as things get crazier and crazier, they become really ill-defined. And I think, to find your footing, you really have to dig deeper. You do. So there's a lot of truth in that. But I think the folks that are on this path have seen a tremendous acceleration in those abilities coming online, or their intuition sharpening.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just in the last couple of years, it's been very pronounced in my experience. But
yeah, well, and back to the football analogy, as much as I sometimes feel like I'm in the fourth quarter trying to explain, then now I'm entering a new game that's not the same sport. I'm just like, well, there's so much to learn. It's amazing, all the lies that we've been taught. I think as people, I think that's what's so challenging. It's hard to believe that the world is this backwards, inverted, evil, etc. I mean, was that challenging for you at first to realize, as we were in the spiritual battle of good and evil? Like, I've talked about this before.
Well, I do the Akashic Record readings, but what I do is what is known as soul prints. And soul prints are the fingerprints of each person has their own fingerprints. Nobody has the same fingerprints. And so what I learned is that we all belong to a specific school in this lifetime. And in that school, we have certain lessons that we're going to go through, as I mentioned before, but this is to answer this question. So, for example, there's the school of service, the school of love, the school of peace, and the school of wisdom. And each person's fingerprints will determine what their conflicts will be, which will then try to put them on their path to graduating from that school. So in other words, let's say a person is in the school of service. They're going to be victims of society. They're going to be knocked down by situations. They're going to say, poor me, poor me, poor me, poor me, and then be a victim of the circumstances and never find their own true power. Now, if they turn it around and say, okay, I'm not the sucker, I'm not the person who's being taken advantage of, but I am being shaped by these experiences to be a leader or to take action and to stand in my own power, then you wind up becoming a healer, a psychologist, social worker, because most of the people who've gone through the most difficult challenges are the people who then are able to help others. So when we speak about the negativity or the experiences that exist in society, it's important for us to be aware of them and to be on top of the news of what's going on. But it's also important for us to not be victims of the circumstances. It's important for us to empower ourselves with that information so that we can grow in our own way and actually have a purpose, a life purpose. So that's one example, right? Then you have other things, so school of wisdom or, school of love. You'll be faced with not knowing how to love, having any emotions with anyone. And no matter what you do, you'll try to run away from feeling. You'll just try to rationalize everything. No, I feel this, I feel this, I feel this, I feel this, but you don't feel true love because you're afraid of love. So you'll be faced with situations where you block your emotions. So you're in the school of love. And you graduate by loving yourself first, right, and then loving someone else.
It's interesting you say that, because I've been in relationships and I've thrown, I guess I'm going to get into a little bit of my personal life right now, but throw myself into these relationships and I'm like, okay, well, this is good enough, and there's parts of this that work. And then I realized later, that I stay in the relationship for too long. And then, especially like if you move in with someone, then it can get challenging to get out of. But what I've realized in being single, and especially going through, the last few years, I've been able to be married to myself. I've been able to, instead of putting all this effort into a relationship and that's just getting by, I'm able to, plant the right seeds and the right nourishment and absolutely flourish. And once again, one of my catalysts is sitting next to me. He said, you really take some time, because it is weird when you go from relationships to then being single, and you're so used to having someone there, but man, it's the best thing I could have done, because my self-confidence has grown, the time I've been able to spend on myself and learn things. And you know, in this show, it's pretty cool, because you know, I studied psychology in college, but I never really necessarily wanted to be a psychologist. I loved learning, but I didn't really want to be a teacher. And this
Right.
show has allowed me to be a part of either helping someone learn something or learning something myself. It's beautiful that it's turned into this. And so I don't know, I just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, that I've grown so much by being able to really focus on myself, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's excellent. Excellent. That's what we're here to do. Uh, you know, we can envelop ourselves in codependent relationships where we lose ourselves because we don't want to be with ourselves, because we don't even know how to feel ourselves, feel who we are, or what our potential or our shortcomings are. We want to throw it off on someone else and say, let me help them, and let me, you know, rescue them, as opposed to actually rescuing ourselves. So when we rescue ourselves, we become whole, and then we attract a more solid character or personality that will then have our best interest in mind. Otherwise, we attract the narcissist energy, because then we become, involved in drama triangles and just trying to lose ourselves again.
Yeah, I gotta say,
And
I feel so much lighter after having said that. That's a rush.
Yeah, this
I-
just
good.
feels a little more like therapy than a
yeah,
show today.
thank you.
You have a way about you. It's
yeah,
yeah,
we'll pay it at the end of the show.
it's very relaxing.
No, it is, and I think that's the beauty of doing this show. It's like we don't know where we're going, really. That's why we just kind of set it up like an improv acting class.
That's
And
good.
go with that. So yeah, this is a gift. I kind of feel pretty high right now just from talking about this stuff, because I haven't really, you know, been able to talk to about it. You know, I talk to Scott sometimes, but sometimes you need a different perspective to just,
Yes, I understand.
you know,
Absolutely.
that's the beauty of these conversations.
Yeah, well, and things have just gotten progressively weirder and weirder with each year. I mean, it's just it's wild, the things that we're seeing. But you know, I remember I was sort of on that pattern pretty much always with a girlfriend. And then, you know, the last one, I decided I really need to focus on myself, and I did, and it's lasted over a decade, and and what a gift, you know, what a gift. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. Nothing has presented itself to me that looks like it could top, you know, just the ability to take the time, you know, when you're not accountable. I feel for folks that are managing you know, a family and a regular job and a regular work week and
a spouse that doesn't get it.
right.
I mean, yeah, I mean, this would be so, because we know people that, you know, they're awake, but their spouse isn't. And it's just, that's got to be
from them
so
all the
challenging.
time.
My hearts go out to them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that could be really disrupting in your life, given the certain, you know, the current circumstances.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, like I mentioned before, and I this is my belief. It's that we have partners, and when we're with people for a reason, for a season, or for a lifetime, and if we evolve and a person doesn't evolve, then we wind up sometimes lowering our energy in order to stay and, you know, stay in that lower frequency. Not to say that the person is better because they're growing, but
Right.
usually that's the response. What do you think you're better? Who do you think you are? Do you think you know more? But generally what happens is that relationships usually go in the opposite direction eventually if two people are on a different energetic vibration. You know, we have the chakras of the body, and the level at which our bodies vibrate, the frequency it vibrates is based upon which chakra you're at. So if a person is embedded in the first chakra, which is the root chakra, in power, money, sex, and being in control, they're in their first chakra, the root chakra. And if they meet somebody who's at a higher vibration in their third eye, so to speak, they've already climbed the ladder of energetic growth. So that person then would be at a higher level, not better, but have evolved, so to speak, on an energetic level, frequency, and therefore they would not be compatible because the person's still stuck there and refuses to move out of that chakra. So the energies of a body play a role in it as well, and that's why people get sick, because they hold the emotions, control the organs, and they mess up the organs because they don't allow it to flow, because they're stuck in one spot.
So true.
Yeah. So that's I do the Reiki work, and I see a lot of people whose chakras are blocked, which blocks the flow from the other chakras underneath. It's like that Tetris game, I believe, with the block is stuck. Once you move it out of the way, everything falls in place.
Right.
People say, "Why am I this? Why am I that?" But they hop on the emotion of things, which causes a physical issue because we can't deal with the emotion. We're afraid of dealing with the emotion. Some people don't know how. And it becomes manifested in a physical place in the body. And then people say, I have this, I have that. Well, each area of the body, each level of the body is corresponds with a specific emotion and a specific organ. And that's how people, generally wind up getting sick.
Yeah, I've done.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I do the distance Reiki or the in-person Reiki, and I clear away the energy, which removes that blockage. The person feels, after burying things over time, it becomes just like a chronic condition and stuck. So
it seems like with the energy work that I do, or have been doing for about 30 years, and I can't believe it's that long, but there may be something that's persistent, but it's persistent because these blockages have to be cleared in a certain order. And if you don't take care of the foundational stuff, you're not going to be able to clear or even have any access to this blockage. So there seems to be a divine order to it.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to ask is, I wonder if you've observed this. It would appear that people are kind of finding their soul families, or there's this recognition that happens an awful lot more than I ever remember it happening. Like when we were at Mount Shasta, this whole group of strangers, everybody was just hugging, and it was like everybody had known each other for a long time, and the phrase kept coming up, "You look familiar. Do I know you?"
Yeah, yeah.
And then I watched from that event to so many subsequent events. That's really on the rise. People are recognizing each other. I think there's a phenomenon taking place in this particular time.
Well, I think when you I'm sorry I cut you off, but I think when you do the work, you raise your level of consciousness, you take ownership for who you are as a vessel, as a soul. I think then you resonate with people who are on that same path, and then you feel connected to them. And there's no contracts, so to speak, because there's more of a soul connection than there is an ego connection where I have to win or lose or be in control or not. It's more of a general, an energetic understanding or connection that's more genuine and more flowing. So I think that's what takes place.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Can you go maybe a little bit more into if people want to know more about the Akashic Records and like what it means or how to tap into it, or because
sure.
That's the first thing that really drew me to this. And I know we were able to welcome everybody to our counseling session, but yeah, if you could go into a little bit more on that topic. I just find it so fascinating, and anyway, please go ahead.
Well, yeah. So the Akashic Records is, as I mentioned before, is an energetic field in the fifth dimension, and it's accessible through dreams. It's accessible through like Edgar Casey, who's a sleeping prophet, who was able to fall asleep and get information through his dreams, or however he received it. And then there are people like myself who get the information through saying a specific prayer, which opens up the energetic connection to the Akashic Records. And whether I do a reading for myself or for someone else, it allows me to then access that information. And the prayer itself and the Akashic Records, as far as I understood it to be, it's a Mayan prayer that was passed down to a Spanish woman. And it was a man by the name of, I think, Johnny Pruzunski, who had a dream. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly. He had a dream, and he dreamt that he would meet this Mexican woman who would pass on to him a prayer. And that's exactly what happened. And then he translated the prayer from Spanish to English. And that's the prayer that I use in order to access the Akashic Records. And when you use the prayer, it somehow opens up the energetic connection A lot of people feel like a lightness on the top of their brow. They feel an opening in the heart, like a calmness in the heart. And along with that, if you're able to get information, you'll then, if you ask questions, you'll get information, or you'll see certain images that relate to what you asked about. And that's what I do. And so obviously when I'm doing readings for people, I don't know the people. They'll ask me questions, and what images will come right through once I open up their records. It's like a book is opened, so to speak.
Wow.
And then stuff is like a download of information will come through, first off, for the most part. And then when that's finished, then I usually have the client ask me questions on what they specifically want to find out or know that I can receive or retrieve from whatever information is passed on.
But that's mostly visual, like it as far as the experience you're having.
Yeah, I see it. I see it in my mind's eye.
Oh,
Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'll see the information, like I'll look up and I'll hear sometimes.
Okay.
Or I'll see information. And when I'm describing when the people say, yeah, that's what that person looked like, or that's what the person is, that's sometimes a name will come through, and I'll say the name, and I'll say, yes, that's the name. I did a reading for someone, and I told them they were dating this person. I think the person's name was Pete, and they said, yeah, I'm dating this person, Pete. So at different times, and it's interesting, I see them past lives will come in. I'll see them in the life. Like, for example, I did a reading for a guy from Belgium. And towards the end of the session, I said, I see you working as a baker in a past life, and you were shunned because of your own belief system in growing spiritually. And the place looks like there is an elephant sign outside. And he said, I work in a restaurant right now that has an elephant. That's the name of the place, called the Elephant. So this information comes through. It's passed on because I'm in an energy field where I'm in that field, and I'm in that matrix of information. And so it helps and it assists a person, because when a person knows what they're going through on an individual basis, it's one thing. But when a person outside of themselves is able to tell them something that they know on a subconscious level, then it becomes easier for them to digest, or easier for them to assimilate, to work on, especially traumas,
Right.
and past lives. Like myself, like I had a fear of doctors. If I go to a doctor, I'm petrified of going to a doctor. And now I know why, because I was a doctor and I didn't like what I probably had to do. So I mistrusted doctors now.
Wow.
Petrified.
Yeah, this is fascinating, because I didn't realize that you could see these images. I was already fascinated. Now I definitely want to get something like this done. I know we're kind of in about that time. Is there anything you wanted to tell the viewers, or obviously where to find you, etc.?
Yeah, sure. Well, I can just tell you about my documentary film quickly if you're interested in that.
Please, that'd be great.
And then I'll tell you my website. We mentioned that before. So the reason I'm mentioning is because it has to do not with past life, but it has to do with the past, and something always was drawing me to this era or this period, as I mentioned before we got on. And for me, I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in playing sports. I played hockey. I played baseball. I played basketball, football. I played every sport. I was very athletic, but I had a deep connection to my grandmother through my own personal trauma at home, my father's personal trauma as a child of war from Europe coming to Brooklyn, when he was 11. I didn't understand. I had intuition, so I felt the energy of the family, but nobody was speaking what was in their mind or what they were feeling. They just were acting it out with huffing and puffing and aggression, and it was frustrating me. So my intuition just made me try to understand what was happening. And so I guess as I got older, putting this film together was somewhat of a cleansing experience. So I'd go to my grandmother, who lived about a block and a half away, when I had arguments with my parents. And I'd sit at a table. She'd take out photo albums of these people with furry hats and snowy scenes and no smiles on their faces. And she would say, look at this. And I'd turn the page, and I was appeasing her at first because I wanted to, first of all, she was saving me from that stress from my house. She'd feed me. And then I would look at the photo albums, and I came to a picture of a man in a military uniform. And I said, who is this? She said, that's your grandfather. And I said to myself, it doesn't look like the grandfather that I know, who she's married to now, who I was calling grandpa. So I went home and I said, Dad, did you know your father was a soldier? And he said, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about that subject. So right there, I felt a shock, like, how would you not want to talk about your father, you know? But then I was 7 years old. So as the time went on, I'd go to that drawer where those pictures were, and I'd open them up and look at that photo of that soldier because I connected to something in him. I don't know what it was at the time. As the years went by, my grandmother told me he was a school teacher. He was sent off to war at 24 years old. She gave birth to my father. He was sent to the front in Moscow. She saw him for the last time in a political college where he was running the political college of, where he was. To make a long story short, when she passed away, she didn't speak much about him because she didn't want to insult her husband she was married to and the grandfather that I knew. Mm-hmm. So when she passed away, I found those photo albums, and under the photo albums were diaries that were in Russian. And what I did was I thought they were in Russian, but they were in an indigenous language called the Komi language, which is Cyrillic letters, but a different language. So I had them translated by picking a letter out of that box, sending it to Russia, having someone say, I said, I'm the grandson of Lydia. My grandmother passed like 5 years already now. Maybe you can translate. Happened to be a niece who was 80 years old, translated about 50 pages of diary, sent them back to me. I had them translated to English, to Russian, then to English. And then I found all the information, the pre-war when Hitler attacked Russia, what she was experiencing, my grandfather being sent away, my father and them not having food, him writing letters from the college saying, I'm freezing, there's no clothes here, can you send me something? And she crying and saying, I can't send him anything. There's no clothes to send, there's nothing to feed. And hearing all this hardship and this love and this romance that she shared, and then finally coming across the death certificate in the back of the diary that she received from his death. And I had it translated, it said, your husband perished as a hero for the motherland on this and this date in the Battle of Moscow, and so and so and so forth. So I said, I have to find him. I was going through a divorce at the time. My children were shut out of my life. I felt, how do we live a life, have children? How do we live? And how, if we live and we're not famous, but we have an existence and struggle in our lives as an individual, how can we be forgotten? How can we be erased from the memory of a family? And so I decided to, through these diaries, try to make contact with the military archives and so on and so forth. So after about 3-4 months, I finally got a response and said, we know where your grandfather is buried. He's in a mass grave in a specific town. And I said, but he must have had family because my grandmother's family, they were married. So I wrote to all these different towns and so on and so forth. Eventually, I made contact with the family of my grandfather, there were people alive. And I made a trip to northern Ural, which is about an hour and a half north of Moscow. I found my grandfather's grave, found his body, visited the family, and they were so impressed that I came to a place where no one ever came, because it was a place all the way up north in parts of Russia where there were all the prison camps from World War II, World War I. And my grandmother used to talk about that as a kid with me. But to make a long story short, I made a documentary film that I played in the New Jersey and New York film festivals. I was never a documentary filmmaker, but I had the passion and the photography skills, so to speak, to make it turn out to something that was heartfelt. My father then opened up. He cried about not sharing this with me because as a child, my grandmother would cry to him about her first husband, his father, and say, I miss him. And she said, he said, when she cried, I cried, and I didn't know what to do. So it was very touching, a very moving experience. And then I better understood my father's trauma, which helped me better forgive him and better understand the human experience.
Gosh, I've got to see that.
Yeah, can the viewers, is that something?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's on YouTube. It's called Forgotten. I'll share the link with you. You could put it up, or you can look for it. And basically, that's what I've done. And so that connected me to my ancestors and made me have a connection to the epigenetics, so to speak, of how our bodies are our bodies, but the experiences from past generations come to play when we experience them. Like Holocaust survivors, their grandchildren sometimes have that experience that's found in their gene. you know, the specific gene change of children of Holocaust survivors and people from war as well. So I put that together, and I do, as I said, I do the Reiki work, the Akashic Record work, shamanic work, and yeah, my website is called Adam Gell, universalhealing.com. And anybody's interested, they can check it out. And I do free consultations if interested in exploring whatever I'm offering.
Excellent.
Absolutely. This has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for allowing us to speak and being vulnerable and sharing. And I'm not surprised I met you through Michael Della Rocca, because this is the type of people that he attracts. And we appreciate having you as the Great Awakening unfolds. Would be okay if we have you back?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Perfect. Yep. All right. Well, we'll bid you farewell for tonight. Hang out after, and we'll talk a little bit. But thank you. Thanks to the viewers. We appreciate you. Take care.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, both of you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yep.